These characters are deep. They make me feel like they are real people, seriously, because they're not just this surface level, and neither is the romantic aspects a surface level experience. Everything goes deep and wide in this book, and it is literally just like 380 something pages. It's not that big, but it's very full of life and depth, and I think it's also full of influence and meaning. Hi, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about Kennedy Ryan's book, Can't Get Enough. This is actually a book review that I'm doing, and I'm trying a little bit of a different style here because I wrote my blog post and took some notes, and I want to share this with you. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. While we are talking, I also have myself some tea, and I have a little bit of knitting here, so we're gonna see exactly how this goes. And this is kind of a bit of a little experiment right now. So get your tea, come sit and join me as we talk about Can't Get Enough by Kennedy Ryan. I started reading this book in 2025. I think it was like May of 2025. I'll have to check my Storygraph for it. But I was so excited to read the book because if you can see right here on my shelf, these are a few of the different Kennedy Ryan books that I have. And I read This Could Be Us. I read Before I Let Go. And those are the first two books in the Skyline series. And then this book came out, Can't Get Enough. So I was really looking forward to reading it because if you have not read the series already, these are stories about three friends that live in the Skyline community. And you don't have to read one in order to read the other one, but it's good if you read them in order because then you know what the friends have gone through and what they mean to one another and what their experience is like. This is a romance novel, but I would also like to say that it's contemporary fiction as well because it does deal with the life experiences and choices of women, including their relationships and what life is just like for them, right? When we are going through this journey with these women, we are not only understanding what their lives are like, but we're going through the experience of emotional connection, building relationships, and even the breakdown of relationships at times for them in the book. So I don't want to spoil anything when it comes to the other series, and if I have any spoilers for this particular book, I will let you know. Well, I'll do my best to let you know because, like I said, this is the first time that I am trying this style of book review. If you want the details and like my structured thoughts and everything, instead of just like my conversational pieces on this particular book, you can find it on my website, which is Mrs. R's Reading Corner. And there I did a full review. I have all of the ratings that I'm going to give you here, but I also gave you information on exactly why I chose to rate the book the way that I did. Okay, so we're going to have that right there. I'm looking at my blog post, and then I am going into my reading journal because I did keep notes. I was excited about reading this book, but it did take me on a ride, and that had a bit to do with my rating and my reading experience, which we are definitely going to get into. So yeah, let's just kind of jump in really quick. This book centers around the main female character whose name is Hendrix and the main male character who is Maverick. Now, Hendrix has two friends that we learn about from the other series, and they already have their friend group, they already have their families, and we know a little bit about Hendrix in the other stories, but we don't really, really learn about her story until this book. I don't want to spoil it for you, right? Because the story, her story unfolds as we are going through this journey, but she is the auntie per se. She is the woman who has chosen to not have children, to focus in on her career and her extended family relationships, and then to kind of be the aunt to the friends' children, right? And to be there for everyone. And she's made these choices intentionally, and she definitely enjoys living her life this way. Imagine that you have already established your life and you've chosen the direction that you want to go in. You've already decided you don't want to have children. You've already decided how you want your career to work, and you're enjoying everything. And then all of a sudden, someone that you meet has this magnetic, intense attraction to you that you kind of feel, but that he won't let go of. And so he just continues to pursue you in a way that builds you and your friends and your family up. You know, like, what would you do? Would you begin to consider your choices, or would you just continue to move forward in the direction that you were already going in and not let anything interrupt that? That's kind of what this story is. I loved how Kennedy Ryan actually gave this woman her own perspective, her own unshakable resolve about life, things that she just would not have ever considered saying yes to or no to because she already made up her mind. But what I love about this story is also the parallel. Maverick ends up being this character that also has done kind of the same thing in his life. He's lived his life a certain way already. He's already made a certain amount of money. He's already had a certain amount of relationships. And, you know, he's decided what he wants and what he doesn't want in his life. And they're both just kind of like moving forward in their own direction until their paths meet, which is crazy about the parallel because parallels don't normally intersect, right? But in this story, the two things that intersect are these two people, but everything about them becomes kind of like a yin and a yang, or the thing that he's dealing with, she's dealing with in another way, or something that he's already experienced, she is experiencing. And I didn't know how much I was going to appreciate that about this story until it was finished. The thing about this book is it really solidified to me why I love Kennedy Ryan's writing. Now, there are things about it, there are small things that aggravated me while I read the book, which we'll get into. But when I sat back and I thought about exactly what she did in this book, it just reminded me as to why I keep buying and reading her books. Because she really is a great writer. She causes me to really think about not just what's happening in my life, but to also consider other positions and other choices. And not only that, but she kind of wraps this realistic conversation, right, about reality. She wraps it in a love story. And it's not a cheesy love story. It's not a cookie cutter love story. It does have particular tropes, they all do, but it's done in such a way that for me, I almost forget that there is a way that this is supposed to end up, right? She also really shows that she's a great writer because she doesn't just have the main plot. I wondered while I was reading this book, was she preparing me for another book? Because when I read Before I Let Go, I didn't think that I was going to be preparing for This Could Be Us. And then I should have known that there was going to be a third story because those were the two friends. And then shortly after, I learned when I was reading This Could Be Us that she was preparing us for Can't Get Enough. And so even as I was reading Can't Get Enough, I was like, is there more to this? While I read um This Could Be Us, I literally reached out to Kennedy online and was like, "Hey, I wish you would tell such and such a story. This is none of these are the stories that I asked for, but I literally asked her for another character story because of the subplots that she puts in, how much detail she gives us in the character development. And it's one of the reasons why I like big books, but those big books are normally about 1,000 pages long before the author is able to really draw me in and do what she does in about a 300 or 400 page book, which again solidifies that she's a great writer. She's a really great author. Kennedy has given us these two characters that deal with real world situations. They deal with, real problems. They have real successes, and it's not something that we can't fathom or that we can't imagine because it is very much real. She even talks about in the beginning of the book how there were certain things that she dealt with before she started writing this book. And then at the end of the book, she also had certain things that happen at the end. Kennedy Ryan gives us these two characters with this realistic experience. When I first started reading it, it was no different than when I first started reading Before I Let Go. And I'm looking over because that's where my hardcover book for Before I Let Go is, but my softcover Kennedy Ryan books are over here. So when I first started reading Before I Let Go, I had to pause. And the reason why was because there were parts of me that I did not want to deal with some of the things that I knew I was going to deal with when I read that book. And it was the same thing when I was reading this one. It's not like I got to get my mind right because of all the horrible things that are going to happen. It's just that emotionally, it is not light and fluffy. It's not one of the just straight comfy books. You do get comfortable in the story, but this book is emotionally um it is a little bit heavy, okay? And the reason why is because it deals with grief and loss, and it deals with aging parents and personal struggles, choices that we have to make when it comes to these things. And there were times where I cried, right? There were times where I had to put the book down because I wasn't quite ready to process some of the emotions that came with reading this book, but it is also one of the reasons why I enjoyed it. It just took me a minute. And sometimes that's what happens when I'm reading. As you'll learn as we keep on going, if you watched one of my other videos or you listen to my podcast on my reading experience and my reading choices, sometimes I put a book down, and some people would consider like that to be DNFing. But for me, I'm not exactly DNFing a book per se. I'm just kind of saying like I'm not ready for this right now, or I'm not interested in this right now. And for this book, it was I just wasn't ready to do all of that work when I started this book back in May of 2025. And so now here we are in February 2026, and literally I think I picked up the book officially again in probably November or December, and then I put it down again, and I kept picking it up and coming back to it because I wanted to finish it. I wanted to know what happened with the characters. I wanted to understand their story, and I just knew that I needed some time to kind of work through the things that were happening in the book. I don't want to give you any spoilers or anything, but Hendrix, she is dealing with, her mother has Alzheimer's, and there are portions of her dealing with that become very taxing for her. And they impact her life in a way that causes her to really rethink and reevaluate some of her prior decisions. Okay. So then we have the main character, Maverick, who he has his own story. And I do love this about the dual POV that we get when reading Kenny Ryan's books, because he has his own story, and his story is full of really, 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 I guess kind of like extreme highs, and then he has some lows. And in those spaces, we still see this man that is like a fully developed emotionally intelligent man that also struggles at times with decisions that he's making and what should he do next, but is so intentional about how he's building his relationships because of who he has had in his life in the past and the impact that they have had, and how he goes back to them for some advice sometimes, I guess I should say. There were certain things that I absolutely loved about this book. I love the relational and community involvement. I love how people were tied to their families, their friends, their community, how important it was to have not only a relationship with self and a certain level of personal awareness, but also how important it was for them to have their family and their friends and their community, and how the dynamic of friend, associate, coworker was even discussed in this book, because people don't talk about this enough, right? And I love how it was done. It was done in such a way that really, could make someone question, okay, so what does it mean to be someone's friend? And what is an associate? And what happens when you have this coworker dynamic and things are growing and changing, which we also saw, I think, in This Could Be Us. I believe we saw that in that book as well. And I think giving place to those conversations is what makes room for bibliotherapy. And if you don't know what bibliotherapy is, I could do a video on that later. Just let me know down in the comments if you want me to talk about it. But basically, bibliotherapy is, in short, it was something that was developed with veterans from Vietnam, because they would come back and they would have certain things that they were dealing with, but they weren't ready to actually go to therapy. So they were handed specific books that they would read. And through the experience of the books, there were ways that they were working on self, and they would go back and speak with a professional, and that professional would help them to, deal with the thoughts and the emotions and a lot of the different events that they were having in their lives. I don't think enough people understand that that is one of the things that books do for us. Not just the nonfiction books, but the fiction books themselves. They take us through this experience where we are subconsciously going through the same trials and experiences, whether they are highs or lows of the characters, and then we're processing them on our own. Sometimes we don't even fully process it while we're reading, but after the reading, when we let the book and the events sit with us, that's when it really comes out that, wow, I needed to read that because there were some things I needed to experience and go through. There were some emotions I needed to feel. And then not only that, but it makes room for self-discovery. There have been books that I've read that it was the only book that I've ever read of that type. I don't think I would ever want to read another one again, but I was glad that I went through that experience because I understood certain things about myself. I learned a lot about what I think and what I feel, my moral character, my value system, my level of integrity, the things that I would be willing to adjust and not adjust. And that is some of what happens in this book, right? We go through this experience with these characters and we begin to see that they are, on their own journey having these trials and things that I don't think I would have ever really considered or thought about. I actually thought about. And it was what made reading the book hard at times, but it was also what made reading the book beautiful, because not only did I just go through the experience with the author, but I also had to go through certain things with myself, and I had to let certain things resonate within me, just to kind of say, okay, this is what this is like, or what do I think this would be like, right? So I really, really enjoyed how she put those family structures, those relational structures within the book, so that our characters could really have depth, because that is something that they definitely have. These characters are deep. They make me feel like they are real people, seriously, because they're not they're not just this surface level, and neither is the romantic aspects a surface level experience. Everything goes deep and wide in this book, and it is literally just like 380 something pages. It's not that big, but it's very full of life and depth, and I think it's also full of influence. and meaning. We're talking just about my experience with the book. It was a journey for me because I did have to take a step away from it to come back and let it rest. I had to let some of the topics rest a little bit, and then I went back and I picked it up. This last portion of reading, I was really excited because I wanted to know what was going to happen. I wanted to see what choices they were going to make. I wanted to understand, you know, how important certain decisions were to them, okay? And and I found it to be, it was beautiful. Like, I'm searching for the words, but it was really beautiful in the end to see how things came together. And I literally cried. Like, I cried when this book was over because it was so beautiful. It really, really was so beautiful. Okay. So I guess like one of the key words for this book would be beautiful. I didn't know that I would use it so much to describe it, but yeah. Okay, so some of the other bookish things that I do want to mention about it, while I do love Kennedy Ryan's writings, there were certain things about the main male character that kind of drove me crazy, which I am seeing in a lot of her books. And I have to be careful how I put this because I don't want certain things to like be featured in the video or what have you. I might do a different portion of this and post it inside of my Patreon because there are certain topics that I don't just want to like spew out, like just put it out on my channel. But it does have to do with the intimacy and the way that certain things were portrayed in the story. There were certain things that are being presented in stories now that don't necessarily resonate with me. It's a way of doing things, and if I can say when it comes to intimacy level for this book, it is open door, spicy, slow burn, romance focused, okay? So there's a lot there, and it is a process, okay? And it is a enjoyable process when it comes to the romance focus and everything. But one of my concerns when it comes to some of these books is the portrayal of the intimacy, and how if you're not an already emotionally developed individual, if you're not at a certain age with your own preferences and understandings and things like that, you could take this as being a type of influence, and you could think that there are certain things that need to happen in this space. And so I do want to preface this book with that. And it's one of the things that went into my actual rating for the book. If we talk about my actual rating system, which I am going to get the paper really quick for myself, I do have a graphic for this that is posted on my website, and I will post it here so that you could see what the rating card was, the score was for this particular book, and how everything broke down. But I do want to kind of discuss it with you a little bit so you can understand why the book got the rating that it got from me. And this is going to be how I rate my books from here on out. I did have a previous video where I talked about my rating system, but I think that was back in like 2013 or 2015. However, since then, my ratings have changed, and I've put a lot more thought into how I rate my books. And now, because I read different types of books, and I know that while I could just sit here and be like, oh, I liked it, I didn't like it, I want to give more. I think I've said it before in a few of my other videos. I want to give more, but not only do I want to give more, I want to be fair to the author, but I also want to be as transparent and honest about the book to the reader, to those of you who come and listen to this for the purpose of trying to decide if you want to read the book or not, right? Okay, so I said let me get the paper, and I should have said let me get the papers because it's multiple papers. When we're talking about the actual rating for this book, we are discussing the reader experience. We're discussing the craft and the structure of the book, its impact and meaning, and then the recommendability and the content advisory. So let's talk about this a little bit. Again, I can and will do another video discussing my current rating system. But for reference, if you just want to know just plain and just flat out, what does this mean with regards to this book? It is on my website under the reviews tab, and you can go to Can't Get Enough and just scroll down, and the full rating is there. Let's talk first about the reader experience. Now, the reader experience includes readability, ease of reading, enjoyability, and emotional weight. Okay, so it feels kind of technical, but it is. It is kind of. So for readability, it got a 5. Ease of reading and emotional weight, those are kind of the same thing. It got a 3. And for enjoyability, it got a 4. And so what does this mean? It means that this book was basically easy to read, right? And I enjoyed the experience. However, it was a bit heavy, and that's why I said I had to put it down. So the reader experience for this book was a 4 because it was a enjoyable experience, but the emotional weight of it was a bit heavy. That just meant that it dealt with things like grief, and the personal journey was one that had to be considered. Like, it wasn't light and fluffy. That's not what this was, the emotional weight of it. Now, that just changed the reading experience for me. It didn't make the book, good or bad or anything. It just changed the level of the experience for me, what I had to put into it. Then there is the craft and the structure of the book. What goes into that portion is the quality of writing, the plot development, the pace and creativity for the book, and the character development. So this section got a 4.6. And I've kind of already told you why. There were multiple levels of the plot, right? We've got the plot, and then we've got the subplots, and then the kind of subplots, but not enough to take us on this tangent that gets us lost, but enough to keep us invested in the story, and then wanting to know if we're going to get multiple stories after this for other characters, and even wondering at the end, like, what happens next? Is there going to be another book for this couple, right? The character development, oh, I absolutely loved it because I loved the main male character. His qualities, his integrity, his commitment to family, the depth of this male character, it was lovely. So the development of who he was, his experience, what his relationships were like, I mean, chef's kiss. Like, I really, really loved the character development that took place in this book. The quality of writing was really good. It was really high. So she got a 4 when it came to quality of writing. And the reason why is because I think a 5 would just be like perfect. And I'm not quite sure who could get a 5 just yet when it comes to the quality of writing. But it was so high, it was like almost there. There were just certain things that I brought it down for. The pace, I felt like it had a perfect pace. The book, it didn't feel like it was too slow. I never got bored with the book. I don't even think I got overwhelmed with the book. It was just, in general, all the complexities, the different levels of things that were happening as we were going through this adventure with them. It just, me as a person, I had to take a step back. It doesn't mean that that's something that you'll have to do, but that's what happened with me. And then the creativity. I thought that the scenarios that we saw, the way that the relationships were developed, the things that happened, I felt like it was really creative in regards to being a realistic contemporary romance story. I felt like she used her imagination, but then she probably also had some scenarios that she pulled from. And for me, it was nice. It was a really breath of fresh air to see these relationships the way that they were, to see the characters have the experiences the way that they did. I also could tell that she did some research when it came to specific topics. There were like these real world scenarios, even for today, that made me think, oh wow, that's something that could literally be happening right now. I loved how she pulled all this together. Craft and structure section, it got a 4.6. Then there is the impact and the meaning, okay? So, impact and meaning, what goes into that is the insightfulness, the message quality, the values, and alignment. And that is about my worldview and my value system. This is going to be a rating that's different for everyone because you may not have the same worldview or values, or you may not expect the book to align with you the same way, or you don't even just have this level of expectation. But for me, this goes into my rating. So when it comes to impact and meaning, the insightfulness and the message quality, I felt like Kennedy Ryan really honed in on a particular message she was trying to get across in this book through this relationship, right? Through these characters. When you walk away, there's something that you are getting. And for me, that message was really like, I dare you to dream, right? It was a quiet whisper through every page, through every chapter of the book, where she was like, I dare you to dream again, and I dare you to dream, and I dare you to wish, and I dare you to hope. And regardless of who we were looking at, or what was happening, there was always this space of what's in your heart and what's happening around you in your relationships and in the world. I mean, there's even this portion where Hendrix's mother is going through something and she's staring out the window. And I'm almost like brought to tears thinking about this, but she's thinking about her past. And remember, I said she's going through Alzheimer's. So she's thinking about her past. And there is a space where there's also like, dare to dream of the past. Dare to have a dream and a remembrance of what things were like before, not just of where you are now and what it could be like later. That is the quiet whisper throughout this entire book. And that's why I keep saying, like, it's beautiful. So the message quality, the insightfulness, they were very high. There was a 4s and 5s. And then there was the values and alignment. Now, most of the things that were in the book, they resonate with me. They are in alignment with my worldview and my values. However, there were small things that did not, and that's why I didn't get a 5. But a book doesn't have to necessarily be all in alignment with everything that I believe, however, and how I live and what I would recommend. However, I do want to make sure that in my rating, I give voice to, there are certain things that I don't necessarily agree with in this story, and in what's happening, but overall, it's in alignment with my values and my worldview. The content advisory does not have a rating system per se, where it goes into the number that the book got for the rating, 1 to 5 stars, but it does play a part in the recommendability. Because when it comes to, can I recommend the book, I'm asking myself, can I just go out and be like, oh yeah, read this book? Or read this book if you like, or do I have to, like for this book, read this book, but be cautious of this, and this? The content advisory is composed of the language, the intimacy scale, violence, and emotional intensity and themes. So there is very little hostile or profanity in the book. So it got a very low rating for the language. The violence, there's very little of that outside of like a little bit of a threat or what have you. For the emotional intensity, it did get a 2 for that, and that was because of, like what I already talked about when it comes to what I had to go through emotionally as I was reading this particular book. Now, when we get to the intimacy scale, it got a 3 because it does have the open door. It is spicy. It is a slow burn. It is romance focused. And hopefully you understand, like, that means that things are on the page. And so because of these content advisory sections of it is where we came in with a 3 for the recommendability. Now, I so desperately kind of wanted to just say that this book was like a 4.75, but that means that all of the other things exceed the content advisory when it comes to the recommendability, right? And they don't, because those were the things that caused me to close the book. Those were some of the things that caused me to like pause. Those are some of the things that caused me to deal with stuff like within myself. But it did not change that I absolutely love that I read the book, that I absolutely love that I own the book, that it rests on my shelves, that I can go back to it and read it anytime that I want. It will never change the fact that I want to recommend it to healthy women that are emotionally intelligent and that like to read stuff like this. It doesn't change that. It just means I can't recommend it to any and everyone without certain caveats. And so this book got a 3.75 from me. I really loved reading it. I hope that the other books that I read from Kenny Ryan give me such a great experience. And yes, there are certain things, like I said before, certain, small parts that kind of like frustrated me. But overall, the book in and of itself, the experience of the book, the beauty of the book, the way that the author wrote it, it makes it a really, really good book. And so, again, like while I wanted to give it a 4.75, and get it really close to a 5, because I want to also be true to my rating system and to how I want to really view books now, this is where it sits. So, again, if you would like to get more details on this and be able to see it in writing, then you can visit my website, which is Mrs. R's Reading Corner. And then you just click on the reviews tab and it'll be there. I can also drop the link down below so that you can just find it and go right over there and see it. It is a really beautiful cover. Okay. And as I mentioned before, it is a part of the, I believe, Skyland series. And this is book 3 in the series. You do not have to read books 1 and 2 in order to read this one. But if you do read books 1 and 2, then you know the background of some of the characters here. You've kind of been on this journey with her and you know some of her experience. I will also say, which I didn't give voice to, I know that this is what the character looks like on the cover. This is not what the character looked like to me. That's not what she looked like. I also want to give voice to the diversity of the characters in the book, which I forgot to mention. So oftentimes the characters in the book, they all are the same, right? They're slim, they have straight hair. Like there's all these things about them that are just like what we're used to. Well, in this book, we see characters that are full figure women, that, their hair textures are different. We see a representation of what it means to be a Black woman, to have like different things that she's going through and experiencing with her hair. But we also see a celebration of her beauty, in that one of the reasons why Maverick loves and is so intrigued with her is because she is confident in who she is, and she shows what that means by presenting herself in so many different ways for herself and to others. And I really can't believe I forgot to even mention this like in my blog or anything, but I just thought about it. That is also something that I enjoyed reading. Also, I will be posting a playlist on my website to attach to the blog. I didn't do it last night, but I did write it down. So I am going to be attaching a little bit of a playlist that goes with this book, because when I would put this book down and I would go read something else, it was so funny because I would be listening to music and I would be like, oh my gosh, that sounds like something that Maverick would say to Hendrix, or something that they would be going through, or something that they would be listening to. And it was just, the story is it's really good. So, yeah, I really enjoyed reading it. And, you know, if you think that you would want to enjoy the book too, then I'm going to post the link below, and you can grab your copy and go ahead, enjoy the story. You know what my perspectives are. I've given you my content advisory warnings, and then just go ahead and dive into the book and, you know, enjoy. So, if this was your first time joining me and you enjoyed this review, then go ahead and give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing. If it was not your first time, thank you again for coming and taking the seat and sitting with me here in my reading corner, my little corner of the world. Thank you for coming in and joining me. I hope you do come back again and sit with me while we can talk about the books that we're reading, the bookish topics, have some tea. I didn't knit at all. I thought I would be. I had it here, but I didn't knit at all. And I would love to have you come back and visit with me. That's all I have for now. Again, I am Makita. This is Mrs. R's Books and Things. My website is Mrs. R's Reading Corner, and I hope to connect with you again soon. Until next time, bye now.